morning. Glad you could join us. Well, you know the old saying, no pain, no gain. You could easily amend that to say, no risk, no gain. And risk is the focus of our conversation this morning with our guest, Karen Firestone. She's the author of the new book, Even the Odds, Sensible Risk-Taking in Business, Investing, and Life. And Karen's also CEO and co-founder of the investment firm Aureus Asset Management. Karen, did I bungle the name of the company?
You did a good job.
All right, you're going to give me a pass.
Yep,
I appreciate
you
it.
bet.
Thank you for being here. So, look, we normally talk politics here more than finance, but they're intermingled. Some viewers may wonder where this topic fits in. So it just seemed to me that selecting a president is a leap of faith that involves a lot of risk assessment. What do you see as the risks in the choice we're facing in November, and how does your approach to dealing with risk apply to this choice?
Well, it's a very good question, because voting is an act that involves risk, because every time you make a selection for a candidate, you assume that that candidate has your best interest at heart. Yours, your family's, your community, and your country. So we seem to have two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and the question you're asking is whether their positions and their actions will align with the voters. And how do you feel about that? So, for example, if we hear what Hillary Clinton says about different topics, let's start there. I think it's easier because she's been quite clear about certain subjects. And you know that, for example, she believes that the highest income brackets perhaps should pay higher taxes at the very high rates, but she has talked about keeping the middle class strong or stronger and lowering some taxes if she's able to, and subsidies that are in place and have been in place through the last administration. Right. She also believes that healthcare prices in part have been too high on pharmaceutical drugs. She's talked about how there has to be, she believes in national healthcare and extending Obamacare. Okay, so then you look at Donald Trump. And what we've heard about, for example, is very little about tax policy, but he'll say taxes are too high. It might be a typical type of pronouncement. And then he'll say, we need to do things about trade. We have to enact restrictions on trade, fines and taxes on goods brought into the United States in order to save jobs. Well, what happens then, of course, is if you restrict trade by saying the Mexicans can't ship in their lettuce, or the Chinese can't send clothes made for the Gap to the United States unless we raise prices 20%. Well, don't you think that those governments would do the same to the United States?
So one of the issues we really grapple with, in those of us who cover politics, is that voters, you know, they trust their own info sources. They don't, there aren't as many universally respected arbiters of what the facts are. You've constantly got to do your due diligence on companies, on stocks.
Right.
What's sort of the key to making sure you've got good information? You aren't just looking at something through, say, a political filter.
So if we're talking about politics, there are many ways that people can talk to, well, they can read and they can express and see what the candidates believe on all types of issues, because I believe that there are certain websites that now, whether it's
fact checkers,
that will give people, the two candidates, with the specific views and policy statements that they've made and how it would affect them. So people don't really understand usually how a policy might affect their job or their community, their city, how the municipality works. And I think it's important that people
start. So that's a good tip. Search out some of those comparative websites and start doing some research.
Because it's a risk not to do that.
That's absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit more about some economic issues when we continue our conversation with the author of Even the Odds, Sensible Risk-Taking in Business, Investing, and Life. Karen Firestone, our conversation continues in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking with Karen Firestone, CEO of the investment firm Aureus Asset Management and author of the new book, Even the Odds. Karen, what are you telling your clients about the British exit from the EU and the prospect, even before this happened, of the U.S. slipping into recession again?
Right. Very good question, and extremely important to us in the investment business. So going into the Brexit vote, almost everyone thought that the Remain would win. And we had been raising cash over the last few months. We had a fairly high level of cash, and we wanted to keep the cash because uncertainty is always a risk in the market. So now we have the vote. They're leaving.
Yep.
The market comes down. One risk that we had is if we don't communicate with our clients, and everyone in my business should feel an obligation to explain to their clients how they're feeling about this type of situation. And what we said is that the markets have a tendency to overcorrect at times, and then they revert to the mean.
And I should point out, when we tape this, which is significantly because of vacation schedule ahead of the airtime,
right,
we had already started to see the market bouncing back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It dropped very hard and then
Yeah.
started to come back
Yeah.
because the U.S. economy is growing. I mean, we care about the United States and our dollars. We're not using pounds and we're not using euros. The dollar is strengthened, but that's less important to the average citizen. But we know that the economy has been growing. Jobs have been added steadily over several years. The unemployment rate is under 5%. Consumer spending is starting to pick up. And very importantly, the value of people's homes has grown significantly over the last several years.
You know, hear all the talk about how that's a bubble, and we all know what happens eventually to bubbles. Do you share the concerns that some have voiced about slipping back into recession in the near future?
No, I don't right now. I mean, I think that interest rates are and will remain low for quite some time, and the inflation rate is low. Yet oil prices at anything below $70 are a meaningful positive in terms of keeping costs down. Remember, they were $110 a barrel very, very recently. And so I think that the economy is stable. It's improving. It just isn't improving very fast.
Well, I wish we had more time because there's so much more to get into here. But if there's sort of one takeaway elevator line you could give our viewers about their mindset when they assess risks in their own financial and political lives, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important that people consider how much can I afford to lose to make sure that they don't invest more or put more money into something than is sensible for them, because you don't want to become so uncomfortable that your lifestyle will change. But it's good to take some risk because that's the only way to get return in this world.
Karen, appreciate you coming by.
Thank you, John.
Good luck with the book. It is entitled Even the Odds, Sensible Risk-Taking in Business, Investing in Life, author Karen Firestone. That's it for me. Now I'm going to send it back to my colleagues for more WBZ News.